Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're listening to this slide presentation. This is the Cisco Network Academy IT Essentials version 7 training guide. If you're listening, most likely you already have access to the student LMS area where you could do your more read ups, where you could also take your quizzes, where you could take your exams and also take your exam and finally get your Cisco certification badge. Okay, if you don't have that, you could inbox or let me know and we'll get to you. Okay, this is module 9. We've gone through module 1 up to 8, and this is the ninth module, virtualization and cloud computing. Most of the students taking this course, you must have done intro to cybersecurity, you must have done some cybersecurity basics, and most of you are already doing virtualization. A good number of you. Most of you have you're running Kali Linux operating system on a virtual box. You're running Raspberry Pi hardware operating system. You're running Arduino. You're running down variable web application. You're actually doing virtualization. So, but today you're going to learn some of the nitty gritty of what this is about and the different types, different functions, the different advantages and disadvantages. Okay, let's get to work. So this is just my planning guide. So the training actually starts from here, module 9. Okay, virtualization and cloud computing. So we're going to understand what virtualization is all about, what cloud computing is all about. So let's start from virtualization. It's a very short model. Within the next 15 minutes, we should be done. But you don't need to rush it. You need to understand the concept. You need to take your notes. If you have any question, please check out the WhatsApp mentorship group and we will get in contact with you. You could ask your questions and I'm going to be very glad to answer you. Now, there's a short video explanation you have in your Cisco LMS, your Cisco Learning Management System, that does a presentation for you. What is the cloud? Why do we need a cloud? What is the cloud used for? Data storage and sharing, cloud service, the advantage of the cloud. Cloud is simply when you have resources over the internet. It can be any type of resource. It can be hardware, it can be network, it can be a file, it can be a website, it can be anything. It can even be a software, right? And it helps for collaboration and ease of. For instance, you don't need to have Excel, for instance, for you to be able to open spreadsheets. You can use the Google Sheet to open such kind of files. That is cloud in action there. So please watch that short video and make your notes. Cloud virtual computing and virtualization. Virtualization enables a single computer to host multiple independent virtual computers called virtual machine that shares the host hardware. So we have a base system, a Windows 10 system. You put a virtualization software, then you can now have one, two, three, four, five computers. So you have a single computer host multiple independent computers, but they are all virtual. That's why it's called virtualization, right? So virtualization software separates the actual physical hardware from the virtual machine instances. Okay, cloud computing separates the application from the hardware. Yes, that's what you have. Example of cloud providers are Amazon Web Services. You also have clouds, Google Cloud Services. You also have Windows, or rather Microsoft Azure. Alibaba have theirs also, Alibaba Cloud. We also have several smaller, but these are the major cloud vendors. Okay, traditional server deployment. Traditionally, organizations deliver applications and services using powerful dedicated server. A server typically renders solutions, information, data, whatever to other clients. So you have a web server. So if you have a website, www.soutechventures.com, so it's going to sit on the web server. So if you ping that website, if you type that website on your browser, it's going to serve you. Same thing, an email server, info@contact@soutechventures.com. If you do that, you're going to be able to hit this email server. SQL for your databases, file servers to save files. For instance, Google renders and several other companies like Amazon. If you need to host large files, so you could use their file service. It's a little bit cheaper. 1 terabyte you can get it very cheap, very affordable, very affordable systems when you are running large scale servers, because you now sell space in small piecemeals. Okay, server virtualization. So you have the hardware, you have your hypervisor, then you have your operating systems, right? So that's what I just explained earlier on. Advantages. So you have better use of resources. Like I said, it becomes make it more a reduced cost. So instead of me having one system here, I need to send file to an office in another city. I have another system there. I have to put my files here, burn it into a hard disk, go to the airport or use a courier company, sends it to the next city. Instead of all of that, you could just purchase a cloud server, right? When you do that, all the files you could dump it there, everybody, and you could do permission, you could do several configuration for access control, so everybody can have access to it, and that way you have reduced costs. And also improves disaster recovery. Very important, very important. Disaster recovery. My hard disk can get bad, my PC, something can happen to it, but you could have all of these things in the cloud and also have backups online, and you have those information readily available. On the client side, on your home PC, so this is what it looks like. Your physical machine, your host, let's say Windows for instance, you cannot use any of the virtualization software like Hyper-V, like virtual PC, Oracle VirtualBox, VMware. Any of these softwares, there are so many of them. Once you have them, you could add operating systems on them. You could add, for instance, on my PC I have VMware, I also have Oracle VirtualBox. So if I'm to do anything cyber security that have to do with Kali Linux, most of the times I use the Kali Linux or any of the vulnerable applications, I use the VMware. But if I'm to do anything with respect to the Cisco academic courses, most of the times I prefer using the Oracle VirtualBox. With that, I could put on the virtual machines instances, and I could have different operating systems and do whatever I need to do. So once you log in into your virtual machine, you could enter into any of these systems and they are all virtual, but they are all sitting on top of your main computer. Okay, you have two types, right? So you have type 1, typically used for server. Then the type 1 runs directly on the hardware of a host and manages the allocation of the system resources to VMware. So this is your type 1. So you have your server, this is your hardware, your hypervisor, your OS. So I think you call this, I think, bare metal or so. This is another way because they are sitting on top of the hardware. Unlike for type 2, where you have to have your hardware, you have an operating system first before you have the virtualization software, then you cannot have, that's the one I just explained earlier on. But in this case, bare metal. So the hypervisor is on the hardware. So this is used mostly in hosting companies and the rest. But for homes, where you're going to be using in your system, your personal use is normally type 2. So you just have this, your normal hardware. Then you have your operating system. Then you can put either Windows Hyper-V or Oracle VirtualBox or VMware. Then you can also add in your different operating systems. Okay, minimum requirement. Now, your PC must support virtualization, right? So you might need to go to BIOS. We talked about BIOS, the basic input output system. When you boot up your system, most systems is going to be on F2 or F10, depending. You could check that up, and you make sure that you turn on virtualization on. The thing is, if you Install your virtualization software. While installing your virtualization software like Hyper-V, Oracle VirtualBox, any of them, if it's not enabled already, it's going to prompt you and tell you that this CPU does not support virtualization. You don't need to fret, you don't need to worry. All you just need to do is to go back to your BIOS and switch it on. Maybe it's disabled, you just enable it. If you come back to your installation, you're going to have a free ride. Now, memory, 4 gig. 4 gig is actually so low because you're not going to have a smooth ride on your virtual machines. You want to at least have 8 gig. I would say recommended 8 gig. Have at least 8 gig. It's going to make a whole lot of sense for you. Okay, I think just minimum requirements. So install Linux on the virtual machine. That's the lab. So we're going to do that. Most of you doing this cybersecurity course, this is just like a prerequisite to the cybersecurity course. Most of you have already implemented that. But if you can't do that, you could check out the lab. It has instructions on how to do that. All you just need to do is install your, like I said, install the VirtualBox first. Download the Linux image, then you add it on this. I'll provide instructions for that later on. It's a very smooth process. Then cloud computing. So what is cloud computing? Like I said, on-demand delivery of computing services. It can be anything over the internet. It can be files, it can be music, it can be softwares, it can be applications, it can be network, it can be hardware, it can be anything. Once you're able to deliver that over the internet, that's cloud computing. So you have different models. So software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. So these are the explanations you have. Network, hardware. For instance, there's a time I was doing an iOS, that's a mobile app for iOS. Now, because we have issues some of the Mac devices, you could rent a Mac on the cloud. Yes, you could rent a Windows on the cloud. So that's IaaS. Just Google rent a cloud, rather rent a Mac or rent Windows PC. You have platforms. So they've deployed this for you. So you could actually use this as a service. So you will pay per time, you could pay monthly, as low as $30, $40. You could rent for a very nice system for a month. And they can tell you how many hours per day. I think the one I used was 8 hours per day. So you could pay for that. Same thing, platform as a service. If you are running softwares like web development softwares, cybersecurity applications that actually like development servers or development systems. For instance, if you need to do coding in Python, you need to do coding in Java, wherever. You have platforms online that can help you do that. So you don't need to have that within your PC. Whereas for softwares, your normal email, Office, like I talked about, Excel, you could have all of those things in the cloud, and it's cheaper, it's better. Characteristics, like we said, is self-service, rapid elasticity, resource pooling. Like I talked about, 8 hours. So they have full maximization of that particular hardware. Okay, that's all. It's a very short module, just about 40 minutes. Chapter summary, we explain server virtualization, how to install the different characteristics and the different models. These are some of the things, new words that you've learned and terms. So please go through them. If you have any questions, don't forget to ask in the mentorship group, and I'll be there to guide you. Thank you very much. See you in module 10.